Uh, all right, I don't have the agenda up in front of me. I can get that.
Well, we have a couple of guests that are going to do a presentation
Right,
on the TCOM 911 IGA.
okay,
We
yeah.
have Wendy Hill and Keith Welling.
Okay,
Hi.
hi, okay, so I'll call the meeting to order then and welcome our guests. And get back here to the right. Here, I can see everybody again. And please go ahead with your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here with you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
A little nod, perfect. I'm going to share my screen here in a minute because I've got a few slides and helps me keep on track, and it helps you understand what we're talking about. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to interrupt, and we'll take care of the questions as we go. But first, I want to thank you because your fire district has been very good partner to TCOM over the years, and we really appreciate that. And under this new radio project, we've had a couple of opportunities. One of them is your station A2, and as you know, we're looking to try and put a radio tower up there so that we get better public safety radio communications for the peninsula. So we wanted to thank you in person now that we have a captive audience. So thank you for that. We're moving ahead with the county on those permits, and hopefully we can get that built and operational here in the next couple of years. But tonight we want to talk with you about our IGA, the intergovernmental agreement that you have with TCOM. And that agreement was set up in way long time ago, way before my time with TCOM. And so we wanted to take a look at it again. The important things about the agreement are, I'm sorry, I'm trying to fiddle with my screen so that I can see your faces and watch my slideshow. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand, I'll see it. The intergovernmental agreement was last renewed, refreshed back in 2010. And in 2010, you may or may not recall, Capcom was the 911 agency, and it was a department of Thurston County. And in 2010, the agency decided to go, and there's Gloria, welcome back. Good to see you. Anyway, in 2010, TCOM 911 became an independent agency. So we are a 501c3. We're organized under an IGA with all of the public safety agencies here in the county, one of which is your district. And so the last time this IGA was refreshed was in 2010. So back in 2018, the administration board of directors here at TCOM was looking at the possibility of borrowing money. And they wanted to borrow money for the purpose of replacing the radio system. And in doing that research, we ran into some bonding agents who looked at our IGA and said there was a little bit of concern with an article, section 3.4.6, where it talks about TCOM's ability to borrow money. And there was some ambiguity with the verbiage that said, unless and until TCOM 911 has such power under applicable law, which really casts some doubt on whether the agency could borrow money. Now, subsequently, the agency did go ahead. We worked with the legislature and the county to enact another 0.1% emergency communications sales use tax. And with that additional revenue, we were able to leverage private funding for the replacement of the radio system. But even that private financer said it would be much better for TCOM if you would change this language. So that's a long story to tell you. That's where this process started back in 2018. So the administration board formed a small working group with admin board members and the operations board members, and they went through the IGA and came up with most of these recommendations. But a little background, the IGA allows any member agency to make amendments, and you can propose the amendment, and what the amendment has to do is it has to be approved by all signatures to the IGA. So that's what we're doing over the past several months, and the next couple of months. We're going to every single member agency governance group and showing you the recommendations, changes, and asking for your approval for those changes. And then once every agency approves, then those changes become effective. So the bylaw, as I mentioned, the bylaw IGA working group made most of these recommendations you're going to see. And then there were some recommendations that were put forward by the administration board of directors, particularly those that referenced the original 1/10 of 1%. The original 1/10 of 1% was in the IGA, but it was stated just like that, 1/10 of 1%. And as you know, we're getting 2/10, and so we needed to change that whole language so that the county would continue to pass that money that they collect on our behalf to TCOM for the purpose it was intended. They are doing that, by the way, but we wanted to codify it here in the IGA, so we changed all that language. All the recommendations have been reviewed and approved by the board, and we also had a group of city attorneys and the county attorney got together and read through the IGA, offered some housekeeping changes, and made some and met with their approval. So what I would like to do is just give you a high level, very high level overview of what the recommendations are. And you should have received a red line version of the IGA so that if you have any questions, you can always go look there, or you can ask tonight, and I've got that red line version available. We can go take a look and answer your questions. But what I'd like to do is just make you familiar with all the changes, and then you can deliberate at your leisure and let us know how you want to proceed. So if that's all right with you, I'll do this overview real briefly. Good? All right. So Article 1, this is the first place that we ran into that language about the revised sales use tax language. And what we elected to do, rather than identify the specific amount, we identified the language to reflect total receipts from the emergency communications sales use tax. So that way, if anything changes in the future, plus or minus, we don't have to revisit this language. It'll be more general. In Article 2, we took a look at a bunch of the, all of the definitions and came up with some changes. Communication services was revised and clarified. Emergency communication systems and facilities was added. This is specific language that came right out of the RCW that authorizes the sales use tax. So we needed to include that in our IGA. We clarified member agency. We revised the sales use language in member assessments. We revised and clarified the non-member agency and added public safety interlocal operation. In Article 3, this is that article that started this whole thing for us. And so in 3.4.6, we removed the language that says through one or more of the member agencies unless and until TCOM has such power under applicable law. So that language is recommended to be removed, and that will that will solve that issue of any ambiguity about our ability to borrow money. 3.4.7, we made some minor language changes. In Article 4, we did some minor language changes in 4.2. We also revised the language in 4.3 to reflect the current status. And then 4.4, we added language that allows TCOM to purchase capital equipment for our member agencies. Previous to this, we did not really have a clear direction in any of our governance documents that allowed us to do that. And so within the radio replacement project, we are also buying all of the subscriber radios, that mobile radios and portable radios for every agency that's a member of TCOM. And we really did not have clear direction on the ability to do that. So Article 4.4 adds that language and gives us the permission to buy you all your subscriber radios for the new system. 4.6 was deleted entirely. This was the language in the old IGA that talked about TCOM leasing the facility that we're in here. It's a county-owned facility, and that was the only lease we had, was this one section in our IGA. Well, subsequent to Wendy and I taking over and renewing leases and refreshing leases, we executed a lease with the county for this facility, and it has all the terms and conditions. So this language in 4.6 became redundant and unnecessary. Article 5, term and termination. We've had some minor changes in 5.4. Same with Article 6 and 6.4.1. And same, in Article 7, there were no changes. Now I'll just mention here, when I say there were language changes for clarification, most of those language changes had to do with the allocation formula. And I will tell you that we decided to eliminate the allocation formula, and I'll explain that more later, but that's where most of these changes came from. In Article 8, member agencies, we added language that would better define how the administration board of directors would deliberate and admit a new member to the IGA. We've had some inquiries over the past years and found that the language in Article 8 was not very specific and didn't have enough boundaries to really help the board make a decision on whether or not to admit a new member to the agency. And so the most telling or the most significant language was the ability to contribute future revenue from a dedicated funding source for maintenance operations and replacement purposes. This language then enabled the board to place on an application or ask in an application letter to have the applicant describe for the board the ability to meet this requirement. And that way the board would have more background in how that applicant would be able to support their membership in the agency. Article 9, there were no changes. Article 10, again, minor changes for clarification. Article 11 is where we eliminated the allocation formula. And so we deleted the member assessments paragraph. We revised the sales use language in 11.1, and we added a new section that better described the process for putting in place assessments for members or groups of members who want particular services that don't apply to all members. And then deleted 11.3 and 11.4. Just a brief history on Article 11. This article had been in place since the original IGA. And what its intended purpose was to set the allocation formula for member agencies who would pay to fund TCOM or Capcom back in the day. And since the implementation of the first 1/10 of 1% back in 2002, we have not had any member user fees from any member agency, nor do we expect to ever have member agency fees ever again in our future, because our funding source is solid with the 2/10 of 1% sales use revenue. So the board of directors advised the working group that we should eliminate all the allocation formula language for two reasons. One, it's not necessary. And two, the allocation formula that was described was antiquated and outdated. So it wouldn't have been of any use anyway. So that's the bulk of the changes. No change to 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, or 17. And then the Schedule 1 initial funding formula was removed. And those are the recommendations that we put in front of you for your consideration. And then we're asking for your questions and discussion, and then approval at some time when you determine that's appropriate.
All right,
I'll
thank
stop
you.
sharing. There you go.
Yeah. Our chair is back with us. Gloria?
Okay, I'm back. Yes. Sorry about that computer glitch. Yeah, everything sounds good. I guess us as the board need to determine if we want to approve this tonight or if we want to review it. So I'm going to open it up to the rest of you and get your consensus on what you guys would like to do. Anybody want to go first?
I just have a question. Isn't this something we talked about this already, didn't we? Didn't we already make a decision once before all the changes were made? Do you remember, Mill?
Yeah, I think at our last meeting, we voted on something with TCOM.
That may have been the lease document for the
Yeah.
tower site.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that was site-specific information.
okay.
I've got a question or two related to the member assessments and the changes that are made in that area. First off, I wanted to say I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Clearly there was a need to get back in sync with reality, and all these changes make a lot of sense from that standpoint. But I want to just understand, I guess, first off, how do things work? And I understand the sales tax is covering everything, and there's no concern about that. But if in the unlikely event, for some reason that I can't imagine what it would be, TCOM doesn't have enough revenue to cover its expenses, what happens? Does TCOM come back to the agencies and make an assessment? Who's legally responsible ultimately for keeping you in business?
Yeah, so the legal responsibility is the board of directors. And so we are an independent 501c3. And so our board of directors are responsible to make sure that the agency can deliver the services and that we have the funding appropriate to do that. Now, in most agencies, in our role, there are member fees that fund the gap between the excise tax for 911 and the operations expenses. And so those are usually set up under an allocation formula. But as I mentioned earlier, with the 1/10 and now the 2/10, the agency has not found any need to go back to our members and assess fees. So the closest we ever came, Milt, was back in 2013. So we, as an agency in 2008, started using our reserves to bolster our financial situation during the recession. And we literally ran out of money around 2013 and had to take some drastic actions. And what we ended up doing was we froze open positions, we laid off some personnel, and we reduced in force, and we gutted it out essentially without having any member fees. So since then, of course, we added the additional 1/10. We don't think we will face that situation ever again.
What I'd like to know is, and I understand the makeup of the governing board and the processes and so forth is defined in bylaws that are separate from this. But in the old version of this, it documented a process for assessments for members. And that's been removed. And as I read the old language, I could see why. It looked like a pretty onerous process. It would be pretty difficult to ever get an assessment through.
Right.
In the event that assessment was needed, because the definition is still there, which is any costs that go above the revenue. In the unlikely event that that happened, what do the bylaws say? Would that just be the administrative board majority vote? How
No.
does that work?
It's not a majority vote. The same process is, there are some recommended changes to the bylaws, and they recommended a little bit of loosening with regard to assessments, but not in regard to who has to agree to it, and the supermajority of the board first, and then all member agencies. Or let me back up. A supermajority of the board first, and then 3/4 of all member agencies have to approve it. And that has to occur within a 60-day period under the recommendation. Under the current bylaws, it's a 30-day period, which was like impossible, right? I mean, we couldn't do anything within 30 days. I can show you those bylaws, but trust me, it's going to be an onerous thing that will take a lot of pre-planning and discussion in order to implement any user fees. And Wendy can attest to this. My board is dead set against user fees, period. They do not want them. They don't want me to even mention it in any discussions. So I think we're safe.
Well, I appreciate all that, and I'm not necessarily opposed to user fees if the circumstances make sense. So be it. But I am concerned about the process and making sure that there's appropriate governance and input and notice ahead of time so that people who are impacted by it can have a voice in that process. So yeah, I'd like to see the bylaws just to understand that better.
Okay, I will send those out to you.
Yeah.
The other thing that I should mention at this point, since you're asking these kind of questions, the assessments were left in the IGA, member assessments, because on occasion we will have a group, either law enforcement or fire, or maybe even EMS agencies, who want a particular service or a particular application or something that is not benefiting all of the members. And so we wanted to preserve the ability to have an assessment process for those people, for those groups, to pay for that particular want or need, so that not all the members are paying for a small group benefit. You know what I'm saying? So the assessment part was left in place for that purpose.
But that's an assessment for an individual group or agency rather than across the board.
That's correct.
Is there anything in the bylaws that says how assessments would be allocated, or is that something that would be determined when that?
That,
template
that
is
would be
developed?
something that would be determined at the time.
All right, that's the only thing I had a question about.
Anybody else have questions?
I would just add that we did have our legal counsel review the document after Keith sent it over to us, and he had no comments.
Okay, so consensus of the board, do we want to have further discussion on this after this meeting? Or do we want to just move forward and approve it?
Unless there
ahead.
are other questions to be answered, I don't see the merit of, putting this off again or putting us off to another month or something like that.
Okay. Milt?
Personally, before I could vote, I'd like to look at the bylaws, maybe talk with Keith more and understand how that aspect of it works. I don't have concerns about the rest of it, but that
Okay.
piece I do, and for me, that's significant.
Okay. Pam, you got any concerns or anything?
I don't, but I did recognize that Milt wanted the bylaws, so
Okay,
if he wants to review those, we should wait to make a decision. But I don't know, I don't think we should wait 2 or 3 more months. Like sometimes we don't get to stuff right away.
and Daniel, do you have any concerns?
I think I'd go with Milt on that. If it's important for one of us, it's important for all of us to understand that. So
Okay. Okay, so let's make that decision that we get the bylaws, look those over, and then we might have to just call a special meeting to vote and approve this.
Well, what's the timing on this? Is it urgent, or is
Yeah.
it something that we can wait 1 month?
Yeah, I was just going to chip in. We have a few agencies left, so you do have some time. So don't feel rushed. I will get those bylaws out to you all, probably through the chief. What I'll do is I'll give you the current bylaws and the recommended changes, the red line version. So you'll be able to see what's being recommended.
Okay,
I was just going to suggest, Keith, you could send them to me and I'll make sure all the board members get them. So
Yeah.
Perfect. Will do.
okay.
With that, I would suggest it's probably just a regular board meeting.
Board
item.
meeting,
Yeah, board meeting agenda for next month.
okay. So let's put that on for next month agenda. And thank you, Keith, for sharing all of this and this information that we'll look over for you.
Well, thank you and have a good night, commissioners. Thanks.
Great, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Keith and Wendy.
Okay, so next up is Chief's monthly report and septic status.
first, I would ask, did get the report out before the weekend. I hope everybody has had a opportunity to review it. I'd be glad to answer any questions on the report itself, if there are any.
Don't have any concerns.
I don't really have questions about your report. I have a comment. In your goal 4, that's part of your report, right?
Uh-huh.
So number 2 in your goal 4 is executive team will develop and communicate objective messages focusing on direct and indirect impacts and benefits, outcomes to the citizens by June 2021. My comment is we really need to get moving on this if we're going to do that by June, because we only got a few months.
Well, we've already, to some degree, we've started that already, and we kind of hit the ground running. But
There
I
just isn't anything in there, so it looks like we're not doing it. I mean, there's no.
it's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not reportably started yet. So
Just a comment.
Mhm.
Just a note. I noticed.
appreciate that.
I got one question. I saw a new item on here on the first page under public relations. with district monthly website contacts. Maybe that's been there in the past and I just glossed over it, but I just first noticed it this month.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, does that, and I assume Jim Zopoulos or somebody is providing that information. Does that filter out internal views and only reporting external views, or does it include anybody in the department who happens to be looking?
The report,
And secondly, when it says visitors 687, is that unique for the month? Or if I go in there, 5 times during the course of the month, am I counted as 5 visitors?
it is unique visitors. If you went in 5 times, you would be visitor 1. So, and this is in a month count for the month of February. So I believe that looking at the other data, it looked like this was external views, unless somebody dialed in from home and said they were from Brazil or something like that. So anyway, it's new information that Jim has provided, and I thought it might be nice just to show some monitoring of that. Typically, we get a hump of hits after we've received, or citizens have received their newsletter.
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see what the numbers will be in March. And as we report these on a monthly basis, try to get some trends maybe. So yeah, hats off to Jim for pulling that report together for us.
Yeah, that's that'll be interesting to watch.
But it is new.
You can always post that there's a tax increase on the reader board and watch this number go up too.
Might even have some participants in the meeting.
Okay. Any other comments on the monthly report?
Yeah, I had a couple of quick things. Just kind of going down through on the training and that. One of the things I noticed was blue card refresher training. That's good. I mean, that's something that is our incident command communication structure and how we do that kind of thing. And it's a rigorous course to go through to get your certification. And so I'm glad to see that we're participating in some refresher on that. That was one of the things that I would have liked when I was still battalion chief, was to be able to do that. So good on you, Mr. LeMay, for getting that for everybody.
But blue card, to me, that I'm thinking is,
Yeah.
you stop breathing. I mean, I don't know what a blue card.
Yeah, no, it's, I don't remember
hospitals
where
that
the
use-
terminology blue card came from. I don't know, it was just the color of card stock they had for the first set of cards that they made, but it's online training through, what was Chief from Phoenix?
Brunasini.
Yeah, Brunasini. Anyway, it was a really good audio video training course, and then an ability to get a final certification by doing some video training over there at the Mark Noble Center over there behind Home Depot. And I really appreciated the opportunity to be able to do that. It gave us an opportunity when we did that work over at Mark Noble to engage with the folks from Lacey and Olympia, to get to know some of those folks, to get some really good hands-on mentoring right there at the time about, how to do that business and do a good job of it. And so, yeah, that was something I was really proud to be able to be part of.
I thought it was good too. For the record, I think red card being common in the wildland was already taken, and green card already had a niche too. So I think they just had to find a color and give it a card.
Yeah, there you go.
But also, I'd give credit to Derek. He's our training officer now, so I appreciate the comment. But I'd have to resend that back to Derek and say he's doing a great job getting blue card going.
Well, pass that along for me if you would.
Will do.
I do appreciate that. The other thing, just again, is just a comment, just talking about the awards banquet and noting some of the 4, 5, and 20-year and 10-year awards, and just recognizing those folks. And that was, yeah, little Brenty McBride has been around for 20 years. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then a little bit more serious note, I did have a comment on the goal 1 status report and talking about the operations and training for apparatus drivers and that kind of thing. And I note the bottom in the first priority 1 there, first noted the second bullet, currently qualified, we have 5 volunteer and 3 career non-officer driver operators. And I was wondering, remind me, how many non-officer career people do we have?
We have 5 firefighters.
Okay,
2 of them are going through the process. Functionally, I think they do some driving. Brandon?
Well, they are. The reason we said 3 is because 3 are on shifts. We were originally measuring the 9 shifts, the 9 volunteer shifts.
okay,
So that doesn't count for day shift. We're only really measuring. If we need to get more extensive on there, so we were trying to figure out a good measurable, because for the most part, we don't really have a problem on day shift. Everybody's, all the career staff are up and drivers. But our model was the original was the 18 different driver operators because
Yep.
it was 2 positions for the 9 shifts. So
Right.
that comment is the 3 career firefighters that are on shifts.
okay, that helps, thanks, because yeah, I had some concern that we had only 3 of our non-officer career people that had driver certification, and that you've just said that that's not actually the case. Yeah, because I know that part of our requirement for getting hired would be that within some
Right.
time period, I think it's 3 months, they would be certified as a driver operator.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Let us
And
know.
we
if
haven't
you have
hired
any
anybody
suggestions.
as a new daytime firefighter for quite some time. So yeah, all
Right.
right, that answers my question there.
Daniel, do you have any comments?
No.
None? Okay. And then I see that we had the SNUR, the SNUR conference, but it's showing that you have an announcement of the reminder of the conference, but it's looking like you guys already went to it on February 26th. So,
There's actually 2 conferences. The first one was on purchasing,
Okay.
and that one was in February, and the one this week is on labor issues, I believe.
so do we
And
have
it's
any,
Friday.
do we have anybody giving us any comments about the conference today at all? I mean, of any updates on what we should know, the rest of us should know about it? Because I wasn't able to attend because they are all on Fridays and I work Friday.
Yeah,
Did Laura?
I attended that. I don't know if anybody else did.
I did.
I
Okay,
did.
Okay.
Bill did.
Gloria, I believe the presentation is on, I think tape, but it's recorded, so you should be able, I believe, to access it.
Okay. Okay. So
I actually sent that link for the recording out this afternoon
Yeah.
Okay.
to everybody. So
And he
if you want to
basically
watch it, you
read
can.
He basically read his PowerPoint, so you're not going to get,
yeah,
you're not going to lose anything by viewing the PowerPoint. You're going to get everything that we got.
yeah,
Okay.
and the PowerPoint was also available as a standalone piece. And I was going to say the same thing. I would recommend, if you're interested in it at all, would be to read through that. I mean, he covered it rather well. There was a little bit of opportunity to, share and ask a few questions and things like that for elaboration.
Okay.
But I thought in general he did a good job.
I don't recall where, was the PowerPoint available prior to the seminar? Or-
I don't
No.
think it was.
Yeah, I don't think so. It would have been nice to have that and then take notes along with his talk.
Yeah,
I think it was included in the original announcement. I did print mine off before the session.
Yeah, oh, did you? Okay. I
Uh,
probably missed that.
The one thing that he highlighted that stood out to me, and I actually had wanted to follow up, and I'll do it here. He talked some about how certain things that we would consider as maintenance, like landscaping and janitorial, are still public works from the standpoint of needing to be prevailing wage. I wanted to just double check to make sure we had that covered in our agreements with those people.
We're using a standardized public works agreement that we use for varying types of public works contracts based on value. So all of our new agreements have been executed with the Public Works document, including landscaping, and we're renegotiating the janitorial one now, and it will be recorded that way too. So
Okay.
that was really a fuzzy issue about 3 or 4 years ago, and somebody clarified it and making it much harder for us to do that, but it is what it is. So
Yeah,
Any
somebody
more?
asked permission instead of begging forgiveness or something.
I think that's what it was.
Okay, and then, so if we don't have any more questions on the monthly report, if we're good there, then Chief, the septic project status you had?
Yeah, we are moving ahead on that. We have the bids were advertised. I know that we've had at least one interested bidder because they stopped at the station, but they're supposed to pick up the bid packages at the engineer's office. We're set for bid opening, I believe, next week, and hopefully we'll get a number of bids on it. I'm not sure how many packages have been distributed yet, but we're hoping that typically I think it'll be a short-term job, but it's kind of the gearing up and getting the contractor settled and getting everything going, and then they'll be there for a week or two, and then boom, it's done. So
Okay, good.
I'll mention that one of the things I asked the chief after we had our last presentation from Mr. Hatton was that he had mentioned, the estimate that he's put together in the $60,000 range was an estimate for the work by a contractor to do the actual physical installation, dig the holes, put the stuff in the ground, build the mounds, run the piping, do all that kind of stuff. And it does not include anything that we would need to have as an organization in order to maintain operation during, some number of days, hopefully very few, where you can't flush the toilet or run any water at the station because the septic system is disconnected. And so in that short interim, we're going to have some porta potties on site and maybe portable showers or whatever. They're going to have to figure out how to do that so that the staff can continue to do, provide our services to spend the, overnights at the station, to be able to eat dinner, to do, all those kinds of things. So I don't know what those numbers are, what that cost is going to be, but I asked Chief about working with Mr. McBride to sort of put together an estimate of that. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'd like to have us be able to provide the board even an estimate, even if it's a high level one, by the April board meeting. And so I got basic nods and agreement from the chief and a response back from Chief McBride, who, he said, well, we won't know exactly what we need until we talk with the contractor and how he's going to schedule things. I understand that, but you could do a reasonable scenario and say, oh, I don't know, maybe what if we need to rent them for 2 weeks? What if we need to rent them for 1 week? Whatever. We could at least get a rough order of magnitude idea of those additional dollars. And I just think that would be good transparency for the board so that we don't wind up with any costs that we say, wait a minute, that's bigger than the 60,000 that we were quoted by Mr. Hatton. So anyway, I was just thinking along those terms. And I've offered to work with Brent McBride and the chief to try and do that. And I haven't seen those wheels start to turn yet, other than, an acknowledgement by an email to say, oh yeah, we understand, we're going to try and do that.
I'll find out from Brent where he is on that. I know we talked about that and he was working on it. So I'll find out this week and let you know.
Thank you. And I tried to make that explicit to him as well in terms of that's the date by which I want to have information available for the board, is the next month's meeting.
Thanks for following up on that. I know that that came up when Hatton was here, and we acknowledged there's going to be some costs, but we didn't have any follow-up on it. And I really appreciate
Right.
you doing that.
And-
And that's a good thing.
Chief, the other thing I don't know is, because I don't recall Patton's agreement, but is the project oversight by him included in his current contract, or will that be an adder?
It's included in his current contract. That's what the RFP was for, to include that design and project oversight.
Okay,
And it's included in the budget.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, then we'll move on to our next topic, and that's the board workshop. So we've talked about different things that we want to work on, policies, procedures, and revamping. And so we need to decide maybe what topics we want to. We talked about strategic planning and the various other, going just through not procedures, the policies, because there's some that I think we've determined are outdated, some need to be updated. So what we're looking at is possible having a, next workshop being something that entails that. So what does everybody think?
And I think Milt addressed that at our last meeting, or the workshop we did last week, that he thought we should just pick 1 or 2 policies at a time.
Mhm.
Same area and do it rather than trying to, crash
Yeah.
through them all. Milt, you can probably speak better to that, but I do remember we did have some discussion on that.
Yeah, we had some ideas. The chief and I talked some about it this morning, and there's probably a lot of different things we could do. There were 2 that he and I talked about that sounded interesting to me. Well, one's maybe more interesting than the other. One is the budget management process that is looking at just how budget is developed, how it's managed, what's the accountability process, how does the board work with staff on the budget in terms of monitoring month to month how we're doing, and right now we don't, Heidi sends me the cash flow report and I look at that, but that's not part of our regular board packet. We get the warrants, and in past history, the board's working with the budget has come down to nitpicking the chief about, spending for various things and so forth, rather than managing kind of the big picture of what's our spending for maintenance. We budgeted 100,000 and here it's June and we've already spent 125. Why is that? What are we going to do about it? Are we going to change something else to cover for it? That kind of discussion, which I think would be more productive than just looking at the warrants. So anyway, that just how that whole process works could be one topic. Another topic that I think Brian brought up at our workshop last couple of weeks ago, and he and I talked more about, is a more strategic topic related to business continuity planning, which is looking at what are the mission critical functions that we have, and under various scenarios, if you couldn't do those functions, what would you do? And figuring out ways to avoid or mitigate those risks. That's probably a long-term effort, but probably to set it up requires some work between our senior staff and the board on identifying what those mission critical items are and prioritizing them. And then that maybe becomes and the chief mentioned he's going to need extra time to do that. So I said, well, maybe what we're talking about is developing another goal for you for next year based on that kind of discussion. So that's at least a couple of ideas of things that we could do that I
And
think
those are
could be
probably the
productive.
2 hardest. Good job, Milt. We'll get them out of the way, right?
Yeah. So,
But I think you pick one and do it, and then you move on to the next, you know.
okay.
I
Gotta
think
do it.
that's the deal, yeah.
Okay, so anybody else does, Daniel or
And yeah,
Doug?
there's maybe other ideas that are worth considering too. We just, we weren't saying those were the only ones.
So Chief, do you have any input on, reviewing policies on other, I mean, do you feel like there's a lot out there that needs to be looked at, or just we pick a few this year and work on just those few?
Well, I think that that's what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
So I think that we pick some discrete areas that we want to look at. I wouldn't want to select something that was reinventing the whole world. I think we have
Correct, exactly.
to put a scope on it and make sure we stay within those boundaries, or we'll go nuts and we'll never get anything done. So,
Yeah.
And that's part of the conversation Milton and I had, was fairly concisely defining what it was we wanted to do. And I think either of those topics are certainly worthwhile. Personally, I've been thinking about and worrying about and not had the time to deal with continuity of business, but certainly budget management is equally important. So,
Mhm.
I could be swayed in either direction. I guess it's
Right.
what area y'all might think is the one that needs the most attention sooner than the other, or any other subject for that matter.
Okay.
You don't have any requirements for having a business continuity plan? There's no, okay. That's
No,
good.
not really. I mean,
Okay.
it's just good business. There's no legislative requirement to have one.
We had to have them at the hospital. That's why I asked if there was some.
Yeah,
thing that
I know
made-
some industries have them.
Okay.
And the state agency that I used to work for had one. In fact, I was one of them that was involved in creating it, but there are no specific requirements.
Okay, cool.
Anybody else comments?
I would agree that continuity of operations is a pretty important one. And it, to a certain extent, you could extrapolate it to say, if you didn't have the leadership, you would have trouble with budget management as well. So, I mean, yeah, I kind of think continuity of operations is a good one to jump into. That would be my vote, I guess.
I think
Daniel?
That makes good sense.
Okay.
Um,
Well, what I'm thinking that we should do the critical function first, because we've already approved the budget this year, but we need to do one, say the first half of this year is the critical one, and then towards the second half of next year, or of the second half of after July, work on the budget. So this way we have those parameters in place before next year's budget comes up. So that way we already have everything in place for things to be followed. But so what my thinking is do the strategic critical portion first between now and June, and have a workshop on that. And then after June, work on another workshop for the budget. What are you guys' feelings on that?
Well, my comment would be, I would prefer, since I'd probably be the one doing most of it, is to finish our staffing planning work that we're doing now,
Okay.
and then get that back to the board before we begin another project. Frankly, my capacity is, I've got a little bit maybe, but not something that big. And I
Okay.
would suggest that probably a discussion about continuity of business is going to take longer than 2 months. So I think it will be several steps. And again, Milton, I just talked about some of the things, but I think to be meaningful, it'll take a bit of time. It'll take involvement by a number of people and things, and we can certainly do it, but I don't think we'll have it done by June.
Okay, that's fine. I just, I don't know what you guys' thinkings are on this, because I have no clue on that part. So that's why we need the input on what's our timeline for when do we want to start this? When do we want to plan our workshop? Because as you know, as we go into summer, then you run into everybody going on vacation. And the next thing you know, it's September, October, and we haven't accomplished anything. So, so as far as the staffing, where are we at with that, and how much further, how many more months do we need to address the staffing that you're working on?
Well, I've got a meeting with what I'm calling a task force to flesh out the information on our selected option. And I don't think that's going to take long, but I think the discussion as a result of presenting that draft plan will be. So frankly, it's probably up to how long we want to talk about it and decide it. So I hope to have something put together, at least a first cut on that plan, by our April meeting, whether we want to deal with it then or not, maybe do that at a separate meeting. But, you know, I think we can have that spun up, and then just guessing, maybe a month or two beyond that, if the board approves it, then proposing things that we'll need to do, and then do some, begin some long-term planning if it requires us to look at some other funding options.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll support what the chief is saying. I think getting through that staffing effort has got to be a higher top priority. Because that's the big gorilla that we have to wrestle.
Right.
I think if it's possible, timing wise, doing some workshop work that's focused on the business continuity planning could still be done after that, hopefully in time to provide input into goal setting for next year. I do think that there's a limited amount of work that the board can do on that topic, that is working with the chief on setting direction and scoping and prioritizing the effort. But ultimately, that's a chief project, working with his staff to execute ultimately. So we can clearly do some productive workshop stuff at the beginning of it to set the stage, but then it's really has to be staff led from there.
Okay. Well, so at this point, until we get the staffing part done, we're just workshops on hold for this point until we get through that staffing, is what I'm sort of hearing from you guys.
Yeah, I think the next workshop will be probably dealing with staffing. So as a result of the work that I'm working on now. Okay, so then we'll just let you guide us on when you know that's going to be done, and when we can do the next workshop. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think maybe in the meantime, I can begin, maybe Milton and I will have a glass of beer and think about it, the continuity of business stuff. But I think the concern I have is making sure that we're focused enough so that we're not meandering around everywhere. So I think that is the biggest problem. So. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, then our next is approval of the minutes and the warrants.
I hope you all had an opportunity to look at the revised minutes that I sent out today. There were minor changes. They were very minor, but I did send out a couple of changes today. And they are up for approval.
I can move to approve the minutes the way they are, the last minutes that were sent out, the way they're written.
And do we have a second?
A second on that.
Okay, so we've had a proposal, we've had a second, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, minutes approved. Do we have any questions on the warrants?
I have a question. And it came up when I was looking at the warrants. and I'm looking at, Pacific Automation, and I'm looking at some of the other stuff. I know we didn't have an in-person meeting because there was concern over the equipment not working in the conference room. So that's like the second or third time that I've heard that equipment isn't working.
That isn't the reason that we didn't have the meeting today. It was not the AV equipment. That's actually been installed. It has to do with well, Brian could tell you what it is, but it's not the AV.
Oh, good.
Well, actually, when we made the decision, I wanted to make a decision before a last minute, so some folks didn't know and showed up when we weren't ready. But
Mhm.
at the time we made the decision, the audio visual equipment at 81 wasn't working correctly. They since responded and they did correct it.
Nice.
So at the time we made the decision, it was not working. Probably the greater issue was the HVAC, and the issue that we're running into is that the recommendation to us was to have a type of filter that we don't normally have in our HVAC system. What happens, short of the filter itself being in short supply, as you can imagine, it's like toilet paper early on in the thing. Air filters have become a big commodity. But the other problem with that is as we put a more restrictive filter in, it does funny things to our HVAC system and causing different airflow requirements and puts a strain on equipment. So before we slip the filter in, we want to take a close look at what the impact on our system will be before we just start burning out motors and having stale air and a whole bunch of other things. So, it was one of those deals where it was like a can of worms. First, we'll just slip a filter in. Well, then, it has downstream effect from that. So that's the other reason really why we put a postponement on using that room.
I did indoor air quality at the hospital, so I do understand the HVAC system stuff you're talking about. So thanks for clarifying, because I was just concerned that, we've had issues with the new equipment that was bought. And I thought, man, if we aren't getting that running, we need to get some money back or get some training.
We've been kind of disappointed. I mean, they say it's done and it wasn't done. So I think, Brandon tells me we're very close. And it was a fairly complex system, and we had some delays because the audiovisual equipment was in short supply as well. So there were some delays in the delivery of equipment. Well, I mean, everybody's doing Zoom, and so a lot of these components were back ordered and so forth. So I believe we're close. The system, those audiovisual systems that we've installed will continue to be used. We're going to use them extensively for training, communication between the two stations and so forth. So they were a good investment. It's just that we did it at a bad time, but we really had no choice. So
Thanks for explaining.
So I have a question on the warrant on number 144, which is the second one. It's the air exchange, and it's what? Ply movement upgrades. So what is that through Sunset Air? That fee is that part of this?
Plymo
upgrade?
vent.
Is this part of the fees for that system?
No, the Plymo vent is the exhaust for the vehicles in the bay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's a completely separate system from any of the interior HVAC stuff that
okay.
Sunset Air or TCMS would be involved with.
Okay.
yeah, I believe we had to repair a boot. There's actually like a snorkel hose that comes down and covers the exhaust pipe.
Yeah.
And I believe we had to replace one or two of those. So.
Okay. That makes sense now. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
No.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, I said no, I don't have any.
Okay, so we need a motion by somebody to approve the warrants.
Motion to approve?
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, warrants approved. And then the announcement on the SNARS seminar.
Just the announcement that on Friday is the SNOR seminar. I did send those links out to you all. And if you don't have an opportunity to actually participate, there will be a recorded version of the training at a later date.
Okay.
That would be available.
Question about those seminars, Heidi, is there other additional webinars throughout the year for SNOR
From SNOR, you mean, or in general?
in general?
In general, yeah, we do get them. And when we do, I'll forward those to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, do we have any commissioner comments?
I'll just share that I think I mentioned briefly about this a couple of weeks ago. Boston Harbor Association had their annual meeting a couple of weeks ago on Zoom, and there was a mention of the fire department, recognition for support and participating in their, and I can't remember exactly what the activity was. They have a car parade or a house lighting contest or something that we had a presence at, and they greatly appreciate all that involvement and connection with them. So I appreciated their recognition of us. I told them briefly that just a little bit about the impacts of the COVID restrictions that they've had on the department, and just encourage them, if they see a firefighter, to thank them, because it's been a big impact on them in their lives, their personal lives, their families, and so forth. I told them it has not been an easy year to be involved in the fire department, so they were thankful for everything that we're doing.
Nice.
Yeah, nice, Milt. Thank you.
Okay, so no other comments. Review and follow up.
Well, a couple of things. One is that we will get some more information back to the board regarding the total cost estimate for the Station 81 septic project, including those costs that would be paid directly by the district. Also be getting and distributing a copy of the bylaws from TCOM so that we can answer any questions and hopefully take action at our next month's meeting. And hopefully by the April meeting, we'll be able to provide a initial draft report on our staffing plan. That would probably be done in non-public meeting, but I'll keep you posted as I get closer to that. And I think that was about it, unless there's something missing.
Nope, sounds good. Okay, so then we will recess for executive session, which will be performance evaluation. And then that will just encompass the board only at this point. And then we won't be making any decisions or anything. So then we will adjourn.
How long do you expect that to last?
No more than 30.
Approximately
I'm thinking
30 minutes?
30 minutes max.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so
So
I guess,
Well,
Thank you.
So is Glo set up as a co-host so we can continue? Just with
Yeah.
her?
I will set her up as a co-host right now.
And,
how does that, how do I work that then? Do I just, when we're end? I
You just
end
went
it?
at the end, you just hit end and it'll say end meeting for all and you say yes. That's
Okay.
all you have to do.
Okay,
And I'm going to stop the recording right now.